Improvement Company Board of Directors will come to order. It's May 11th, 2021. I want to welcome everybody. It's a beautiful time of year with the blue skies returning. And I think we're kind of seeing brighter days with response to this pandemic. So I welcome everybody. We have a full agenda. And we'll get this ball kicked off. I just want to remind this meeting is being recorded. Emily, is there any public testimony for us this afternoon?
There is not.
Oh, that is a surprise.
They took this meeting off.
So Kelly, I have an item here, item B or C, contract approvals. And I don't see Kelly.
Yeah, it looks like Kelly dropped off.
And we can jump over to Colin if whatever you like.
I think that is fine. Kelly can, or Nick might be prepared to expand upon it. I can tell you at least a bit. So there isn't anything to approve today as far as contracts, but in looking through our contracting rules and in order to just make sure that we're on the up and up, Kelly asked me to put contract approvals as a standing agenda item on all board meeting agendas from here on out. And so we're just going to keep that to get in the habit of making sure that you all at least have a briefing and approval of everything that's appropriate. So Kelly was going to go into kind of the limits and exactly like what types of contracts you'll be seeing routinely, which I can't necessarily speak to, but that's at least you can expect to see this agenda item moving forward.
Sounds wonderful. So Colin, I show you coming up with an equity policy discussion.
That is actually deciding just on timing and to get more prepared for presenting this to the board to remove that from this agenda. But it is something to be discussed, not necessarily equity policy, but to discuss in upcoming board meetings what the best vehicle is to integrate some social justice and equity in capital planning and procurement. So that'll be on a future agenda item. And Peggy, is there anything else that you'd want to add there?
No, I think that's a perfect way to say it. We know there's a line item in the budget for DEI, and we recognize the focus for SDIC is really as it relates to procurement contracts and capital, but we were not prepared to have a further discussion. All the other items, as it falls within DEI, really falls within MCDD. But what we're thinking and wanting to do is to bring all of this in alignment as we move forward on the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. So you'll see it on your next agenda.
Okay, great. Hey, I was remiss. I just wanted to do a roll call vote just to acknowledge Ken Anderton and Mr. Tanny Stephenson are present as well. So Tom Hansel is present. Ken Anderton.
Ken Anderton's present.
And Tanny Stephenson.
Present.
Yeah, I visually see you and I connect, but for the record, thank you. So any discussion from the board members, questions on the equity policy?
None for me.
I'll just wait till I see it.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see, Casey, it looks like they're giving you lots of time to talk about numbers, you and Tanny. I crunch through these worksheets. This is my time of year as well, so I really appreciate budgeting.
Good.
And Casey, before you get started, can I just say a few words?
Please do.
Which is, this year, my first year last year was a little more challenging on putting together a budget because there were 6, 7 different budgets we were doing, and there's a new district informed, et cetera. This year, we really, as MCDD staff, really focused on and trying to keep focused on identifying what we can do, what are the resources, and not just monetary resources, but also human resources of where we need to focus, with the recognition that our first and primary goal, of course, is flood safety, and ensuring that our system is operational and fully functional. And then we also recognize that with the new urban flood safety water quality district down the pipe, having to, the focus was also across the board on how do we allocate resources to that, because all the work that is going to be done for the Corps of Engineers is really, if we don't have that new district standing up and being able to float a bond, all of the other work is not going to be fruitful. So our focus was in starting to address what needed to be done for the PED and the next phase of the modernization system modernization, as well as focusing on where our resources can grow. We were much more, I'm very proud of the way the staff addressed this. They were much more dogmatic about realistically identifying what they can and can't do. You'll see a little bit of reduction in the multi-district projects, et cetera. So there are multi-district projects that we feel need to get done to ensure that everyone has, including, the record management work, et cetera, but also looking at when they are doing multi-district projects, how to line those up so that it's not trying to get everything done in 1 year when it's really not possible to do so. So staff took a much more constrained approach, and what Casey will be going through is the results of the work the staff has done to be very realistic about execution and priorities. So thank you.
Peggy and Casey, I assume, I want to acknowledge Tanny's been involved with this budget development as well, correct?
Yeah,
So-
thank you, Tanny, because Tanny has been invaluable in this process, because it's good to have that give and take and the questions and checks and balances in this. So I truly appreciate him, and I also want to thank Nick, our new CFO, and helping through this process as well. He brings another lens to the approach we've taken. So there were a lot of hands in this, and I appreciate all of it.
Yep, Peggy, thanks for acknowledging. I did view the budget kind of seeing some significant changes in alignment of resources. And I think it is true. You have a finite number of individuals to get the work done. So I look forward to kind of understanding more thoroughly those decisions and how SDIC's needs will be addressed. So.
Okay, with that, I'd like to start jumping into it. I did discuss this with Tanny a week or so ago, I think. And we had a good wide-ranging conversation. He raised a lot of questions, many of which I couldn't answer, so I had to bring in my support team. And I guess they did have a conversation with Tanny to go through some of the things that he raised. So that's a good thing. The budget itself is looking great. Sandy is very sound financially. You look to be having a budget of just under $2 million next year. I'm looking at the summary on the Word document that's SDIC 21-22 proposed budget summary dated May 5th. I see in the second line of the summary paragraph a couple of errors. Expenditures are 714,000, not 748, and a surplus of 303,000, not 269. That's what happens with different versions of the budget. Sorry about the mistake. The beginning balance is budgeted just under $1 million at 969,000, and the ending balance is 1.2, even closer to 1.3 million. So no change in the levy. There's no need to increase. I raised the possibility with you last year of reducing the levy, and you decided you didn't want to do that. So we're just keeping it the same in this budget. Starting the year in 21-22, we expect it to be a good bit more than you started last year, $100,000 more. So you're looking at a surplus this year, $106,000 and $969,000 in beginning balance. Revenue is just over $1 million. It's $30,000 less than last year, with a little less money in interest and projected money from development review fees, which is coming in closer to what we expect to come in at the end of this year. A little more money in direct bills from the federal agencies, and other than that, just a few little changes, but it's pretty close to last year. Any questions so far? Hearing none, we'll move on to the spending side. Levee and drainage system maintenance is down quite a bit with a couple of projects that were done or are being done this year. A wet well repair at the pump station. There was a project in the budget under the levee line to remove some trees on the levee, but that got deferred. So it's pretty much just business as usual on the levee and drainage system maintenance side with no extraordinary projects. SCADA is SCADA, it's down a little bit. Electricity, we're projecting at the same amount for the budget. And then we get to projects and planning, which is always the most fun. It's down a lot this coming year, from 142,000 to 78,000. You'll see where there are ups and downs. District levels of service is new. It's been spent before, but it's new this year. The levee technical program is down, and we also have easement, two items in the PMLS project for project support and easement gap analysis. And I'll let Colin speak to those if you have questions about them. But they are down quite a bit. There are some of the projects, the multi-district projects, that we're foregoing primarily because of staffing reasons.
Casey?
Yep.
So you may be able to answer it. The tow drain rehabilitation, is this to reflect that we're done? We've done all the rehabilitation needed?
My understanding is we have done what we need to do now, but someday in the future there will be more. It's never going to go away. But what was needed to be done was done this year. Now
it just shifts into maintaining.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's my understanding from Kevin.
Great.
Contracts and agreements, about the same as last year, a little less. Well, no, it's a little bit more because we're bumping up the projected cost for MCDD admin because of increases in staff and compensation projected for next year. And we don't have the small amount that we had last year, the $3,000 to support the UFSWQD. The Levee Ready Columbia, the JCA payment is the same, that's unchanged. Professional services is about the same, little ups and downs. There is government relations is funded at the full amount that it should have been budgeted for last year. We didn't for some reason. And there's a small amount in there, about $600 or $800, what is it? $825 if it's necessary to get some help with the Columbia River Treaty as it goes on. But that'll only get spent if it's needed. And you'll see in there the $4,000, $39.60 for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which Peggy touched on. Administrative expenses are virtually unchanged, a little bit less in events and sponsorships and board and landowner expense, largely because of COVID and restrictions on gatherings. So total M&S at $500,000 is well down. It's 32% down from last year. Capital, there's one and only one project you've got going next year, the gravity flow station for $83,000. And Bill will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the rest of the work that's to be done on that is going to be deferred until consolidation time.
And what about I'm surprised the dredging isn't moving forward. That one's been on the books for a long time and it just keeps slipping.
Bill, that one's on you. No, that one's for you. I'm sorry.
I mean, is that a resource issue? We just don't have a PM to manage that?
It's partly a resource issue. It's partly an a artifact of our conversation with this board and MCD board about what to do with the gate tower and the associated drainage pipes underneath the cross levee. So it is, and you'll see this in the CIP when we get to that. The project's still on the books, but it's been shifted to start next year at this point. So it's around, but for those reasons, we decided not to start this year.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Sure.
Okay, debt service, paying off the Troutdale loan, the Troutdale Weir loan from Multnomah County. You decided last year to get that paid off in 3 years. So this is the second of 3 years coming up to pay that, to get rid of that obligation. And then you'll have no debt after 22, 23.
Casey, Tanny,
Sure.
I'm seeing we're paying $6,000 to, to retain that debt obligation. Should we pay it off this next year? I mean,
Good.
we're not making that much in interest. Just raising a question.
You can afford it. You can also afford to let it last a little while longer and cost you another $6,000. And frankly, you got a budget where you're spending $714,000 and you're ending the year with more than 1.5 times your annual budget in reserves.
Right.
And that amount is probably not going to go down in the next 5 years, at least not appreciably, and will end up being higher. So, either way.
So, I can understand having adequate cash reserves, but if we have excessive cash reserves and it's really more than we need, then it would draw to a question: should we just pay this remaining debt off? But I'll leave that to the finance, Ken, his guidance on that, what his recommendation might be. So.
Okay, I'll mark that down as something maybe to talk about at the next meeting.
Mhm.
And Ken and Tanny, please chime in if you have any questions. I feel like I'm lobbing them out.
Are you doing good? I had that same question though. I think, if you don't have to pay interest, why pay it? If you got money in the bank.
I would
Well,
agree. I was just wondering, is there any prepayment penalty or anything for paying that off early?
no, we weren't scheduled to start paying this off for sometime in the future, like another 2 or 3 or 4 years. The county extended the repayment period out so that it wouldn't start for quite a while. And the terms of the loan agreement were that we'd pay them $6,000 in interest every year until we started paying off the principal. So this is until we were done paying the principal. So there's no prepayment penalty. It was a very amicable agreement that we were able to strike with the county. So I will bring back next time a budget that shows that being paid off and just the one installment of $6,000. And all it's going to do is mean that you have $125,000 less in ending balance, but you'll build that back up in the next few years. So yeah, no problem with that. And then we get down to the reserves. You got a whole bunch of money. You don't have any required reserves, any restricted funds, because you paid off the IFA loan. Capital reserve is in there, just designated to, as a place to go for capital funds that are going to be needed in the future. Frankly, Sandy's CIP is less ambitious. It's smaller. There's not as much to do there as in the other districts, except for, you know, in the future when the new district takes over, they'll redo the pump station. So you're sitting on $1.25 million in cash. Pretty straightforward budget this year. You know, even if we have, well, never mind. It's just pretty straightforward. It's easy. You're doing well, and there's no real issues.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking about the Army Corps' work, you know, the PED.
Mhm.
SDIC still does not know what our share, what our liability is.
Nobody does yet.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to point, this reserve is kind of pledged for an assumed contribution we're going to have to make. You know, I would like to know what that commitment will be, just to align with our reserves. You know, we have, this is what it's for. Right now, it's like TBD.
Yeah.
But that only works for so long.
And Casey, I mean, we have put in, and I'll actually let Bill talk about it, but we did address putting it into the 5-year CIP, right?
Yeah.
Casey?
Yes.
And there is an estimate currently in there of, is it 167,000 per year?
For 3 years. I think that's right.
And Casey is more eloquent in talking about than I am, but when he does these budget, he takes a 5-year look and takes a 5-year look at where our capital requirements are as well, and what the estimated assessments need to be into the future. And if I'm correct and recall correctly, Casey, that there is no, based on what the numbers are we have now that we got for the PED, that we do not need to increase rates over the next.
Mhm.
We do not need to increase assessments for SDIC.
Yeah, the latest numbers we have for SDIC show a total obligation for PED and for construction of $600,000. And you're going to be bringing in more money than you spend for most of the next 4 years. So if you start 22, 23 with this $1,270,000 or whatever, you're going to continue to run a surplus overall for the next 4 years, and you would have that other $600,000 in costs. So you're still going to end the 5-year period with probably over $1 million if these numbers hold. If your $500,000 share for PED and your $100,000 for construction is something that you have to pay for, your reserves are still going to be robust.
And as we know, the core numbers can change. That's sitting now at headquarters, and numbers can continue to change, but we felt we would be remiss by not putting and including some number. And the most recent number that we had received into that 5-year capital plan, but recognize those numbers can shift over time.
Annie, have you evaluated, realigning our assessments to match our identified needs? Because I've always been under the mind that we should set our assessments based on identified need. If our reserves should match our risk. So if we can lower our rates and still address the exposure and risk, I think that's something we should be discussing.
I would agree. I think part of it is which ones are you talking about? You talking about immediate 1 to 5, long term?
In my mind, it's more the 1 to 5. I'm assuming in 5 there will be a new government. And I guess this is more of a format discussion maybe. What is the assumption of the other 3 districts? Are they moving towards dissolution, or they have a plan B of resurrecting and funding their own? I mean, we're all in, or we have 2 plans. The urban doesn't stand up, or the urban does. I mean, what's the plan? That's where it's a great question. Do we set up funds that the urban has available to put to purpose, or is that, I'm not clear on that.
And I'm not sure, Tom. I mean, everyone's working toward the same goal of standing up the new district in 25. That's been everybody's focus, with a recognition that they would float a bond to help pay for the construction side of the PMLS, but that the PED portion we're looking at how we're going to work on funding that by the districts. And we haven't made a decision, the boards have not made a decision on the allocation of those costs. We just took a very basic approach that we put the costs that are incurred for PED in each district they are responsible for. But that has not been a board decision, and that really needs to be discussed in format in 22.
So I guess I would, be asking, can we set up a budget, 5-year plan that we address our obligations with the PED based on the scenario? We take care of our obligations inside SDIC, and then have a reserve that is appropriate to address our risk. And, I think that's what, 600,000 is what we're at now.
That's the latest number we've seen, I think.
And I'd be looking to Bill on that number. Is that the right number? I don't know.
Right, so we have 600,000 is the number in the CIP, and I can show that image to the 3 of you here in a moment. The long-term number, though, is bigger than that. It's closer, right now, it's closer to 1.1 million. That includes construction in years 6 through 10. Beyond years 1 through 5. So the numbers at that point, at that level, we still need to have conversations with internally and with the Corps to confirm that construction amount. Honestly, that construction amount seems a little low to me, but given the significant construction activities that are going to be happening in your district during that project.
And I would just add that the construction amount is an estimate that also, the conversation that needs to happen is also around the allocation and the allocation methodology and finalizing that. And so part of that allocation methodology is based on the cost of the actual infrastructure in the district and the benefit received from it. And so some of that benefit is actually shared with some of the other districts. So that's going to be part of the conversation. But the number right now is a really good placeholder. And we know, as Peggy noted, that the Corps will come back with some refined numbers. And when we receive those, we'll have to bring them to your board and the others.
So Tanny, back to you, your role on the urban. Has there been any discussion about, this dissolution phase? I mean, how the existing district should be budgeting? I mean, should we be looking at that liability out in year 6 to 10? Thinking that we're out of business, right? Or is that the urban stands up and magically creates revenue, right?
Well, I think the overall plan is that the urban is going 24, 25. It's up and running and it's got a revenue stream in place. And then it starts its quest for a GO bond to fund the bulk of the capital. I think, the urban with their model, they're going to have something built into that to cover the smaller capital projects. That they wouldn't be doing with a bond. But I see that 24, 25.
So are you saying that we should just focus on our 1 to 5 capital then?
That's where I'm putting most of the energy, is the 1 to 5, because I'm assuming, the larger things, the pump station, that's going to be handled by somebody else. We just need to get it to that point.
So having that piece of information, I guess I would be supportive of, sizing our assessments to, again, match our need and our recommended reserves, right? Because I've also heard, we have finite resources, so it should be pretty easy to program what our assessments need to support us for the next 5 years. And I think it's going to be probably a bit of a glide down. So.
I agree with you, Tom, for my part. My only addition to that, I guess, would be that I would recommend that you not start reducing your rates yet and have that consideration in conjunction with the discussions about how the costs are going to be shared among the districts and getting a better handle a year from now on what those costs are actually going to be, because I think they're still preliminary. There could be a lot of changes. So it makes it a little harder to project what your needs are actually going to be when the big elephant out there hasn't quite coalesced into shape, at the risk of mangling a metaphor.
It hasn't come into the room yet. We don't even know how big the room needs to be.
So I think that you're fine sticking with no change in the levy next year. It actually might go down 0.5% because I think delinquency rates have been going down. But waiting until the following year to learn more about and get something more firm about what the obligations of all the districts are going to be and where you fit into that.
Thanks, Casey. I realize there's tremendous uncertainty on these costs, and I am sensitive to that. But at the same time, I want to make sure we're responsible to our landowners, and we have a plan. So I'm just knowing the SDIC's share of cost, that'd be wonderful to accomplish that. And I'm fine keeping the rates where they're at today, but I think another year is about it. And then we need to be planning for dissolution, quite frankly. I think that needs to be kind of our conversation for SDIC and possibly the other districts. So,
Yeah.
And I think it is, Tom. I think we're getting there. There's still a lot of unanswered questions though, and I would agree with Casey that this probably isn't the year to really make any significant change there. But I'm certainly not of a mindset of taking the costs and putting them into a bowl and hitting blend. You know, and then pouring it out into 4 buckets.
right.
A smoothie.
Yeah.
Wouldn't taste very good though.
No, some people would like the taste, others may not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a bigger decision that the boards need to, as we get a better understanding of what those are, that the boards want to approach.
So Peggy, how do you think that discussion should happen amongst the 4 boards and the urban, just to kind of build a strategy around how do we budget in the meantime? You know,
In the
are we
meantime-
budgeting towards dissolution?
I think you need to be thinking about budgeting toward dissolution. The only question that I have, and I don't have an answer for, it's a question, it's a thought that's come to my head, is as you talk about lowering rates, you know, into the future, or do you carry in a reserve that provides some buffer to landowners? There's a number of ways that I think need to be considered to see what is the best way to do it. And I think we're not ready for that conversation yet because we don't know what the numbers are. But I believe that in 2022, you should be, number one, talking about allocation issues and have an agreement with everyone that this is how we're going to allocate costs for the PED, and an agreement that, and this is how we're going to pay for the construction, and everybody's on board. And so to me, and it would be a good conversation to have with Evan, is that helps to start building up the organization that needs to develop a bond measure, because that can't be us, it has to be somebody independent. And that gets everybody on board to that final push. I do believe that, I am a firm believer that at the rate we're going, the permanent board standing up in May of 2025 is absolutely reasonable and achievable. And then it's floating the bond measure maybe in 26 to pay for the construction. And in the meantime, PED still needs to move forward for us to be ready for that. Was that a very confusing answer, Tom? I see you laughing, so.
It works.
Okay.
I mean, it just reinforces there's so much uncertainty. So
Yeah, and my commitment to all of you as we move forward, because my days are numbered, is that these are the very issues that will be summarized and presented to Jim when he takes on this role, so that this does not get lost in the shuffle, doesn't get waylaid, that there is a a rough schedule. He will do his own thing. He's his own ED, but at least he knows these are important issues for the board members. And we need to do this methodically. So we're keeping pace with all the things that have to get done to get to that dissolution and new district.
Casey, you're done. Now we're on to Bill.
I am done if you don't have anything more for me.
Ken, Tammy, anything for Casey?
We can come up with something later here.
No, good
I'll
work,
count on
Casey.
you, Tanny.
Good work,
So
Casey, as usual.
next time in June, whenever it is, when you get together for your second meeting, we'll bring updates, things that have changed. We're gonna update our year-end projections, so we'll have a better idea of what the ending balance is gonna be. And I'll make that one change about paying off the Multnomah County loan next year. And I think that's about it. So
Casey, thanks for your work on this again.
you bet. Thank you.
Great job, Casey. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Okay, if you're willing to listen to me for a couple minutes, I have some information to share with you. Let me see if I can show this screen here.
Bill, did you send this out?
No.
We and we can send out this information afterwards. We were still making some adjustments on the before this meeting, and so I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to send you two different versions. Okay, so I'll make sure you can see this. That's the biggest I can make it right now. Hopefully that's big enough for you. As Casey suggested, there's relatively speaking, compared to other districts, there's not a lot of capital need that we're anticipating over the next 5 years, 4 years or so. There are a couple of reasons for that. One, the big reason is the PMLS project is hovering, and if that goes through as anticipated, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects under the USACE PMLS projects category in the middle of the page that will be addressed by that larger project. So you had 5 projects in the CIP at various stages to deal with the pump station and ancillary features of that pump station. And if that if the PMLS project moves forward as expected, then you don't need to spend that money. So I showed those projects in your CIP for years 6 through 10, just in case the PMLS doesn't move forward as quickly as anticipated, and the new urban district may want to act earlier than the federal government's ready to move. So my intent is to keep it on the books for the time being until it's addressed. As for the rest of the CIP, we don't have any, at this point, we don't have any expectations to do work on the fall protection work. I'll skip the gravity flow station just for a moment. The gate tower, drainage pipes concepts. I know the LRC group is going to be starting to use some of their funds to do some more alternatives analysis on that project next year. And so if they come up with a design solution, we may be looking at some work starting in FY 2023 to support the design solution there. So you'll hear about that project a lot more next year, and what's expected. The current estimates for either decommissioning or replacing those assets run, between 1.5 and $2 million right now. So it's a lot of money. I think there's a scenario out there where we can complete some of the work just to meet the FEMA accreditation. That's substantially less, but the assets will still be there, so they'll have to be addressed in some manner. The gravity flow station costs are different than you had seen in your last CIP. And the reason for that is this: the project has been moving, and some very preliminary information has suggested to us that the cost to do the work as scoped is to a level that it would be difficult to pay back through savings in pump station electricity costs in any reasonable timeline. So what that's saying is that the ability to use the gravity flow pipes when the water level in the Columbia River is low enough, the short time period there would create a fairly long period of time in order to pay back the investments that we're looking at. So what does that mean for you? So that means that we are anticipating that we'll want to stop this project early next year at a reasonable point in the design process, where if and when this project gets picked up later, they wouldn't have to redo the work. So if you stop too early or stop too late, then there's some duplicative efforts later on. And we're trying to find a sweet spot where that doesn't happen. There is also an interest and need, honestly, to do some inspection work, some field inspection work early next year on those assets to satisfy the Corps' rehabilitation and inspection program requirements. We're out of date a little bit on some of those inspections, and they're expensive inspections, so we wanted to get those done as part of this current project.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
On the, so I can certainly appreciate the ROI on investments in the gravity flow purely on electrical cost, how long it would take to recover that. But is there any benefit of redundancy that the gravity flow avails itself should there be a catastrophic? I mean, what's your professional opinion? Is there value just from a, so be it, it's a migratory phase, but I think there's an emergency exemption where we could open those and release, right?
Yeah, you're correct, Tom. And we actually did that in 2015 when Lake Anderton was formed out in the Trip area, or is it Lake Wagner? I couldn't remember. But in any event, there was a substantial storm, couple of storms actually during that time, that came through and caused quite a bit of havoc in the construction area, but also at our pump stations. And so we did open the gates there for a time, but it turned out that the river level was already starting to rise, and we had to close the gates eventually. So we couldn't use them the entire period of time as redundancy. So it really is dependent upon the Columbia River levels and really just some degree luck that the storms would happen when the river levels are low. Now that does happen. We seem to have a lot of convective storms in this part of the country in October, November time period, and that's about the tail end of historically when the river levels will allow gravity to flow out of Salmon Creek. So yes, it does provide redundancy. The question will be when you have a new pump station there, is that type of redundancy needed?
Thanks, Bill.
What else to say about this? You see the bed and construction costs in here. Something, you also see the dredging project in here. It looks like I was mistaken and we're estimating it would start in 2024. Again, this is partly, is tied very closely with the gate tower conversation. So I think if we can collectively come to an agreement on a path forward next year about the gate tower improvements, that will dictate how quickly we start in on the dredging work. The reason why this is a reminder is that the sediment level on the Salmon Creek side of the gravity pipes between under the levee, the cross levee, is pretty high, and to the point where, from what I understand, it's like halfway up the pipe invert. So in order for water to actually flow either direction, whether to benefit you or benefit MCDD, it's choked. The pipe is choked, and we need to reduce the volume of sediment that's in there. And these days, when you're, as Ken well knows, and I'm sure Tom, you've seen in some of your county projects where you're trying to dispose of sediment, gets pretty costly, particularly if it's contaminated at all. And that's just the default situation in this part of the cities. So the confluence dredging work is happening, or is expected to happen. Timeline still TBD, but that's what we're assuming right now. The new line in this this CIP this year is the SCADA system upgrades. Now, the term itself may seem familiar to you. We focused on upgrading the communication system, which we completed actually in your case, 2 years ago. In this case, we need to make some upgrades to the hardware that allows us to collect data at the pump station. It turns out that the hardware there, we've been able to milk that long enough to the point where it's no longer being supported by the company. And they just, if there's any repair or issues, they just won't provide that assistance for us. So that's not unique just for SDIC. That's the case for all 4 districts. And so we have a project to address the upgrades to those program logic controls, PLCs, in all of the SCADA locations. So, and yours is 29,000. MCDDs will be a lot bigger, and Pen 1s will be close to yours. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
on the gravity flow, do we really want to spend 83 on something that we may not do?
So there are 2 reasons here. I do think the inspection work is important for the Corps' requirements. And honestly, that's a good chunk of that money. It's a fair amount. And yeah, it's a little bit of a roll of dice whether we have to decommission those that asset in the future, or we end up rehabbing it in the future when the urban district is up and running. But knowing this board's interest to have an exit ramp, we felt that this was the right time and not waste money.
Okay.
So I appreciate the sentiment, and so my professional opinion, this is the sweet spot.
And on the gate tower, are we looking primarily now at decommissioning that?
Well, I think we don't know yet. Your board and the MCD board has not had that conversation yet. Again, next year is my hope that the 2 boards will have a frank conversation about it. And I hope that the alternatives analysis that the LRC group is going to be able to pull together will give you some other options besides something that's $2 million to address.
Right. I think it's like $1 million more to rehab it than it is to decommission it, if I remember right.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. There's a difference between the 2. I don't remember. Honestly, now I don't remember which one is which. Yeah, I knew you have to go. You have to dig down in the levee, get to the pipes. So there's a fair amount of cost involved to get to that point.
Okay, and then down here, we've got the district share. It looks like over the 2 years, we basically got 1.1 million. Right?
Over the 10 years,
For the PMLS.
correct?
Okay, so is that like the SDI stimulus program?
I'm not sure how to respond to that directly, but Colin knows a lot more about these costs than I do. And if he's still on the line, I'd ask if he could respond.
I am on the line, but Tanny, maybe you could rephrase the question. I'm not exactly clear on what you were asking.
Okay, so we're basically funding downstream, it looks like about 1.1 million, right, over the projects.
Correct.
Okay, and what is that for?
That is for the pre-engineering or pre-construction engineering design phase of the Portland Metro Levee Study project. And so to get to construction, what we were talking about before, the bond measure to go out, the bond measure really would be for construction, but to be able to continue moving forward toward that, the drainage districts have been in conversation about moving forward through that design phase. And so that cost that is programmed in there is really just for the design phase of the total project. The expectation is the much bigger numbers for construction would be coming in mostly through the new district.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Colin, while you were there, I thought I heard the PMLS project budget is attributed to the assets that are needing repair in SDIC. Is that right?
The budget that is in there right now, or the allocation that is in there right now, is based on a very similar methodology that the Corps is using, which is the benefits to the system that the projects are. So it's not just sort of a one-for-one. If it's a project in SDIC, that SDIC pays for it. And that's what Bill was noting before, is that the overall cost is a bit higher, but there's actually benefits that are received by MCDD for some of the investments in SDIC. So the pump station obviously benefits all the landowners of SDIC, but if that head wall by the pump station was to let go, it would put the eastern part of MCDD at a certain level of risk of failure as well. So some of those costs are shared, and then the final allocation, when we actually enter into a design agreement with the Corps, the drainage districts will need to have, and we'll have a process for actually assigning what those allocations are. So at this point, it's a placeholder that is sort of a best estimate, and also knowing that the Corps is going to come back with some refinements to the numbers.
Thanks, Bill. Ken, Tanny, any further questions for Bill?
No, I'd just like to run down that last part, get that refined as quickly as possible.
We actually don't have, so by October of this year, we will have the updated numbers, but as far as any time before that, there's no guarantee on when, and that's because it's not exactly a black box, but the Portland district of the Army Corps of Engineers had submitted their recommended plan up to their division, and then it goes up to headquarters. And there's a number of quote unquote cost engineering steps that it goes through there, which are checks on the work that the Portland district had done. And so we will be able to report as soon as we hear any of those adjustments.
Okay. And then we can formulate something at that time.
Yeah.
We can, so right now, Mark is working on setting out a timeline for actually having the discussion around what those allocations are. We can have the, and I think it's safe to have the allocation discussion that can be independent of some of the refined numbers, because it really is about sort of costs and benefits. And so you can use the current number, which is a total of 5.6 million across the 4 districts, as a placeholder, and have some discussions using that, and just know that that number will be updated.
Okay. Are we doing
Any
other
anything else?
questions now too, Tom?
Bill, thank you so much. Colin, thank you. Yep, go ahead, Tanny.
I had another one for Bill, if you don't mind. Bill, looking at development review, right? We finished the year with an expense of 18.9 with revenue of 5,400. Is some of that offset because we're going into this year kind of in the same boat? We're looking at 17 expense and a $4,000 income.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. As you can certainly appreciate, Tanny, it's a little bit of a crystal ball of how to anticipate costs and revenue here. So I'll tell you a little bit of information I had to include in the budget. I had a chance to talk to Chris Damjan at the city about what he anticipates for additional development in SDIC area of the city. And he felt there was going to be a bit of an uptick of development activity based on the information he had. So last year we had a total of 1 new project that came through that elevated to a tier 2 level. And so I doubled that this year to 2. But the revenue doesn't quite double when that happens, in part because this board and the other boards agreed to adjust the fee structure for the development review process. So now it's a flat fee of with the 2 flat fees combined, the base fee and the tier 2 fee, it's a little around $2,200 or so. And so if you double that, and I rounded to the nearest 1,000, that's how I came up to $4,000 in revenue this year. Last year, we spent more money, a fair amount of money, particularly on the Taco Bell development. That project actually ended up, there's good news and bad news here. So staff time, we end up spending quite a bit of money in there, and that's reflected in the expenses that you just referenced. In part because there are multiple benefits for us, but we couldn't justify it to get up to a tier 3 level. So it stayed at a tier 2 level, and we never got more than you never got more than $3,000 for that cost or for that project. But the good news is that we were able to negotiate with the developer to have them install on their nickel the big maintenance platform. It's basically a concrete vault that sits over the culvert, and now we have a much safer workspace for our operations team to go out there and rake the debris grate. And that costs, well, I don't know the numbers. Alone, I would guess that would be north of $50,000. So this is something that this district didn't have to pay for, but we had to spend a little more money on the staff time and partly through design and construction in order to get that benefit. So that's one thing. The second thing about expenses is that we spent some time this year doing some analysis to propose that rate adjustments, and I don't expect that next year. And so I think the expenses are closer to 17K. I may be wrong. Hopefully it'll be less and the revenue will be more.
Appreciate that. It's great that they're putting in that platform. That's a lot of chalupas.
Yeah, it's a lot of chalupas. Indeed. It's already out there. So if you just want to go to take a stroll, and we built a nice little access ramp. Again, another, they contributed $5,000 to us to put in this little access ramp down to that point. You can take a nice little stroll down to the top of that concrete vault and look down and see our lovely beaver deceivers and other features there. As you enjoying your chalupa.
As you enjoying your chalupa.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Bill. Ken, are you wrapped up with questions on the budget?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Peggy, thank you for your team. Any new business you'd like to bring up?
I'll just mention a few because I have not been in the office to keep up with this fast-moving group. But I did want to let you know the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District did get their budget. They approved their budget for 22, FY22, which is great, which then means in that budget includes a contribution by a partner of $1.2 million a year so that they will be able to operate. The predominant amount of the budget is focused on the revenue development model, also their equity and the environmental and communications and outreach to the community. One thing I want to let you know is now that they have approved it, Tom, you're familiar with this, that it has been submitted to the TSCC, and we will be getting questions, comments from the TSCC, and there'll be a hearing for certification. I think it's June 3rd, but Casey can slap me if I'm wrong. And so that is moving forward. They will be adopting, Evan has been leading a group for their mission, vision, values, which establishes their very foundation. We anticipate that that will get approved in July. So they are moving forward rapidly. We're looking forward to Jim joining the team on the 1st of June. And at that point in time, I will be going through very things that we talked about here in the board meeting to let them know, understand what the priorities are. I have a commitment to provide overlap where needed until June 15th, and then I will be riding into the sunset.
That's a well-deserved sunset.
Hope so, yes. Thank you.
Any other business from our board members?
I don't have anything.
Good right now.
Okay, so I'm going to call for adjournment of the SDIC board today. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.